Hi, Randy the Mobile Home Guy here. Today we're in our store and we're looking at a pressure system for a Nordyne furnace, the newest furnace for the 80%ers. It's an M1M brand furnace that we're going to be looking at today, but they've also renamed it MG1 and there's an RG1. All of them have the same system, same parts and everything, same design, same water column, all those kinds of things. So today we're going to be looking at that system and how that works and maybe some of the problems we might have with that. So we're going to be looking at this motor here, which is a combustion air motor, and the switch right next to it, that's the pressure switch there and all these tubes that go to it, and here's the power supply for the motor. And this tube here goes up to the roof and pulls in fresh oxygen and pushes it down in through the chamber. So we're going to be looking at that today. First things first, I do not suggest that you who are not real familiar with these taking on any kind of servicing of this model. There's a few things I'm going to talk about that you can do to test the unit to see maybe what part it is and how to kind of say what it's going to do, but there is lots of problems with just kind of sticking your screwdrivers in different places, and it's really dangerous. We're messing with gas, with electricity, those kinds of things. So I don't suggest doing this if you're not a professional, okay? So just want to get that out of the way. So this model, we're going to say that there is a problem. It's not starting because it's saying pressure switch. And if we look really close on here, so we've taken these two screws off that takes this panel off. There's one down here, one just right up here. That screw will take this panel off. And if we look right on the front of the panel, it'll tell us a few of the codes that has to do with different things. So today we're going to be talking about the code that is pressure switch is open or pressure switch is closed. Those two right there. So 2 flashes or 3 flashes. So what we've simulated on this unit is that the fan is on and the pressure switch is not closing. So we're going to turn this on, and if we look immediately, we can see that this red light here is on. See this red light here? That's on. That tells us that the power is on. That's where we're going to be looking. So if we look now, 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. Okay, and that's going to tell us on our readout here, okay, it's going to tell us on our readout pressure switch is open, which means that that circuit that it's trying to connect with the fan coming on, that's not working. So we talked a little bit about maybe how to do that, but what we've done here is I've disconnected the wires to the pressure switch. Okay, but if they were connected and it's having that problem, we're saying maybe that this pressure switch isn't working. So we want to look at that. And what I like to do is I like to bypass the pressure switch to get to the next process in this stage. So what I've done is I've gotten one of these clips that has two ends on it, and I've connected these 2 wires together. And you can connect those. You can use just a regular wire. But now if we look, we have bypassed that, and we've bypassed that function of this furnace to tell us, okay, now what's next? Is that the real problem? Is it in the pressure system or is it in the ignition system? So if you don't have the Magnehelic tester, which you should have if you're testing this furnace to tell you if the motor's good and if the pressure switch is working, then you could do this quick bypass to tell you, okay, now we're getting igniter, now we're getting a burn, now that burn is good. That'll tell you that it's actually one of the problems in the pressure system. Okay? That's just a quick little tip. Okay, so we're up close now talking about the pressure system here. So this is the pressure system right here for the Nordyne furnace. And it consists of this motor here, which pulls in oxygen from the roof, and the pressure switch here. And there's some wires here that power the motor. And there's some wires back here that actually tell the circuit board in here that there's continuity going through this switch. So air comes down and there's a little hole right on this little plate inside of that, and air is sucked through that, and the differential pressure between these 2 pipes make this switch to close. So we're going to look at that system. Okay, so one way of testing to see if your pressure switch is in fact working correctly, this being the pressure switch again, is we're going to turn the thermostat all the way up. We're going to turn the power onto the unit, and this motor is going to come on automatically and start pumping oxygen into the system, and it's going to try and trigger this switch. So we need to see if this switch is working. So that means that to these two wires, if this motor comes on and the switch is working properly, there's going to be continuity between these two switches. So we're going to take these off. Okay, the motor is going to be running. Okay, and then we're going to have our tester set to the continuity, and then we're going to put our test here. And if we have continuity, that means that this switch and this motor is working. So it's probably something else inside the system, like the circuit board or something to that effect. So again, these two need to show continuity to tell us if this switch is working. If the fan is on, no continuity, that means either the switch or the fan is bad. Okay, we have our furnace hooked up to a magnehelic tester which tests inches of water column. The Nordyne furnace M1M is designed to close the pressure switch, or the pressure switch is designed to close the circuit at 0.2. So if the motor is pulling at above 0.2, it should close the switch. So if the motor is pulling above 2 and the switch is not closing, that means it's a bad switch. So if it's on and not pulling above 2, it means it's a bad motor. So we can decide on that by it saying that it's flashing, telling us the pressure switch is not closed. So there is a little bit of a problem we found with this furnace in that it has this motor pulling at 0.25, 0.28 in the first few years, but as that furnace gets a little older, the motor gets a little older, it gets a little louder of course, but it does start pulling at sometime like 0.22, 0.23, those kinds of things. And so to go in and just replace the motor, it kind of fixes the problem for a little while, whereas the switch, it's kind of also worn in for a couple years, and it starts pulling and closing that circuit a little rougher, so it kind of takes a little bit harder for it to close, and maybe it starts closing at 0.22. So those motor switch combinations are pretty close there. Now the other brand of furnace, Coleman furnace, has switched to a 0.1 switch, and that's what I like to go to if the motor's pulling at 0.22 or 0.2, because in those cold days it really is a little harder, and sometimes it'll even dip to a 0.2 on the water column when it's pulling that. And if you get that 0.1 switch, which is from the Coleman brand of furnace, which is exactly the same design but different parts on it, as far as operation, then it solves that problem. Now if the motor's pulling at 0.18 or those kinds of things, time to replace the motor. But don't just go in there, replace the motor thinking we're great, and in a couple of years or even a year you're going to have that same problem. So we're going to turn this on and see if our motor works. Okay, looks like we're pulling it over 0.2 there, so this is 0.2, so we're right at about 0.28. So this is a good motor. If we were flashing that code saying pressure switch is not closed, that means that we have a bad switch because our motor's great. Okay, so on this furnace we have found that it is the motor that's bad, so we're going to replace the motor today. What we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this little piece here from the power, pull this off here, pull these two tubes off. Okay, so now the motor's separated here. So there's a 5/16 screw nut driver there, or a straight, I don't know why they ever created a straight screw, but on the back one down there at the very bottom, you just loosen it a little bit, all the way down here, back in the back there, just loosen it mostly. You don't have to take that one all the way out. And then the front one here on this other side, you're going to want to take that one all the way out. Okay. Set these to the side. And so this is just going to pull forward and turn. So we're going to pull forward and turn. This whole piece comes out here. We can see here. This whole piece comes out. So you have this piece here, and these pieces easily separate. You can see that just separates. We can set this pipe here over to the side. Now your new motor is not going to come with this piece on here, so we can see this is where the air gets pulled through, and this is this precise hole, and so that's where we get our differential pressure is pulled through there. And they call this little piece here a flow probe, and it actually sticks into there right over top of this, right underneath the hole. You can see it in there. So you're going to need to save this piece. So what you do is you take this screw off here, these two screws, and you put a little knife right here and cut that. Kind of get the knife and wedge it in there, and this thing pops right off. And then you're going to put some clear silicone around that edge underneath on the black motor piece there. And you're going to put that back on and put those two screws back in place. The part that you're going to get is going to be this black part right here, this whole piece with the wire. And inside there you can see that there's a motor in there. And there's two fan blades, one on the top, one on the bottom. Before you do this, make sure that motor is really kind of sturdy. Kind of push the blades on, push the insides, and then make sure they're on really good. And also make sure that this screw right here is tight, because sometimes you get this back on and it'll vibrate a tiny bit. And sometimes that fan blade will even hit the housing a little bit, even on the brand new one. So again, make sure you push those fan blades on there, give it a couple little spins, make sure it sounds okay. So then you're ready to go once you put this back on there. So this is a brand new motor, so we're just going to put it right back on, but we're going to see how to do that. So we're going to see that our flow probe is going to be aimed that way. We're going to put the pipe back on. Okay, you can put some silicone around that edge. Gets a little messy there. So you're going to put that on. You're going to put the pipe on the top first. You're going to hook that up first, and you're going to push it back on, and you're going to reconnect it to that screw in the back. Okay, and then you're going to reposition it over its hole here. Once you get it in the screw in the back. There you go. Just tighten it on there. Tighten the one in the back. This is really easy if you have one of these extendable screwdrivers. It's a pain if you don't. You can take the pressure switch off and gets it out of the way a little bit. If you've marked these, you can mark these to tell you which way they go. So this one here and this one here. If you've gotten this on and it starts flashing the same thing, it's like, I wonder what the problem is. Try switching those tubes. Maybe you've gotten them on backwards, and then reconnect the power, and we should be good to go. Okay, I wanted to go over the sequence of operations for an M1M furnace for a Nordyne. It's also an MG1 or an RG1 furnace now. It's a Nordyne or Intertherm furnace. The first thing that comes on, this motor here comes on, closes this switch, which tells this circuit board that you can now turn on the igniter, which you're going to see here. You're going to open this flap here and the igniter is going to come on. And after the igniter comes on, then the gas is going to come on and ignite. And then the igniter is going to go off while the flame still stays on. That's also going to show up here on the circuit board as a little green light telling you that you have a flame at this time. And after those things happen, after the flame comes on, starts the next relay timer, which at that point turns on the blowing. So first is pressure comes into the furnace, trips the switch, turns on igniter, starts the flame, starts to blow. That's the sequence of operation. Each one of those clicking sounds is just a timer going off, a relay telling it, okay, now start your timer, because we want to blow for a certain time to get fresh oxygen. We want to burn for a certain time. We want the igniter to come on for a certain amount of time. All those are basic relays. Those are supposed to happen. Those clicking sounds are supposed to happen. I'm going to show you what the top of this looks like. So this is on top of the furnace of an M1M Nordyne furnace. So this is the top part of the heat exchanger. Okay, and so when you have a roof jack, you have a two-walled roof jack. This is where the exhaust comes out. This is where it pulls in fresh oxygen around here. And then it goes into the furnace, is burned with gas, spent gas, comes out of this and up out through the roof.